It is now my pleasure to introduce A.E. Rooks, our moderator. A.E. Rooks is the author of The Black Joke, the true story of one ship's battle against the slave trade, winner of the Maritime Foundation's Mountbatten Award for the Best Book in 2022, a Jeopardy champion who's additionally received 2 national awards for sex-positive journalism. Rooks's literary passions are united by what the past can teach us about the present, how history shapes our future, and above all, really interesting stories. They participated in another presentation earlier this morning. We are here till noon, and they will also be at the A.Z. Young Park Author Tent B for Between Confession and Concealment, Short Stories of the Modern Soul. And this is A.E. Rooks.
Hi, everybody. I'm busy today. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I know you're not here for me, so let's get to the people that you're actually here for, right? So I'm going to start on my left. Larry Bagneris, author of Call Me Larry, A Creole Man's Triumph Over Racism and Homophobia, is a native New Orleanian. Larry Bagneris began his civil rights activism as a student at St. Augustine High School. After graduating from Xavier University, he moved to Houston, Texas, where he was a 2-term president of the city's Gay Political Caucus and founder of Houston's Pride Parade. Returning to New Orleans in the 1990s, he became a lobbyist for the No AIDS Task Force and served 4 mayoral administrations as director of New Orleans Human Relations Commission. So please welcome Larry. And then on my right, I have Adam Gussow, author of My Family and I, a Mississippi memoir. Adam Gussow is a professor of English and Southern Studies at the University of Mississippi and a blues harmonica player and teacher. He has published a number of books on the blues, including Mr. Satan's Apprentice, a blues memoir, Beyond the Crossroads, The Devil in the Blues Tradition, and Who's Blues? Facing Up to Race and the Future of Music. Gussow's long-time musical partnership with Sterling Mr. Satan Magee was the subject of an award-winning documentary, Satan and Adam, which screened on Netflix for 2 years. The book was a category winner in the Memoir Prize for Books for Reconciliation, and it is an inspiring memoir about the author's lifelong quest for racial reconciliation, the love that sustains his interracial family in contemporary Mississippi, and the yes we can, hope for American renewal that fades after the deaths of Trayvon Martin, Michael Brown, and the despair-driven rise of Black Lives Matter. Okay, so what we're gonna do structurally here is each gentleman has graced us with the fact that they're going to do a reading, which is really exciting. So first, each of them are going to talk about their books a little bit, just give you a pie-in-the-sky overview kind of version of what you're going to find inside. And then we'll alternate for each of them reading a little bit of an excerpt. We'll start getting into discussion. We'll leave some time for questions at the end. So that way, everybody knows where we're going. Cool. Okay, Mr. Larry.
Yes, let me first say this is a very difficult environment for me because I was born deaf and in one ear, which saved me. My mother, when I was 8 years old and the doctor said I was deaf, she said, there's nothing wrong with you. You hear what the heck you want to hear. And I've lived my life that way ever since. This book is a tribute to my parents who raised us in a very racist environment that because we were Creole, we caught it from both the black community and the white community. And in raising us, they instilled in us the idea of being a perfectionist in terms of getting a good education. Why I celebrate them is because in a very tight economic environment, they produce 4 productive kids. My brother is a playwright who took a show from New Orleans one more time, all the way to Broadway, and then back home again. My sister taught in the Orleans Parish school system for 50 years. My baby sister is an emergency room doctor. I say that not to brag. I say that because in those days, black people were lazy. They didn't want to do anything. They didn't want any opportunities. So this is what we were confronted with in those days. This book will take you on my journey to most of the 50 states and around the world studying my community. If I'm going to represent the GLBTQ community, I had to know that community. From being caught in a raid in the Stonewall Bar in May of 1969 To my travels to Jerusalem and the Holy Land, seeking spiritual awareness and finding it only in a gay bar in Tel Aviv, because I saw Jews and Palestinians getting along. It will take you on my effort after having prayed deeply not to be gay. My next step at age 16 was to seek psychiatric help. That psychiatric help, upon being told I could be placed in a shock treatment program, my 5 years of praying passionately not to be gay, my prayers were answered when I told a psychiatrist where he could stick his shock treatment program. It will take you on my 18 years of working in corporate America out of Houston and my personal time in building the LGBTQ community, which drives today, creating the Houston's first Pride Parade in 1979, which today is the third largest in the country. The idea was to present the parade so that people could see the community on parade and pick the organizations they wanted to be a part of. It will expose you to my days as the lobbyist in the 90s, right on its Capitol ground for the New Age Task Force, fighting the, and I changed this word out of respect, it's not stupidity, but the hate of the Louisiana legislature that trying to pass a bill that said if you assume a person was HIV positive and you felt threatened by them, you could kill them and it would be justifiable homicide. We killed that particular piece of legislation by one vote. It will take you on my journey working for 4 mayors in the city of New Orleans, and we'll close with getting a phone call from a young man that said in Houston that they wanted to hire me for my 18 years of work there. In the book, it will tell you this is some of the joys of me feeling I had completed what I was put on earth to do, and that's part of what the book is about. Thank you.
Thank you for all of your work and for your words. So then we're going to have a same sort of top-level overview from Adam.
All right. Can you hear me? I think I'll get up on the mic a little bit. And by the way, didn't Chekhov say if you had a gun on the wall in the first act to get used by the end of the play?
He did.
If you require me to show that I can play the harmonica, I will make a few sounds.
I will now.
Okay. I better not. That's all anybody will remember. So one thing to consider, when the year I was born, 1958, this sort of broad historical background of this, 4% of Americans in a Gallup poll were in favor of black-white intermarriage. 4%. In the year 2021, it was 94%. So there's been this extraordinary transformation in the way that America, and it may be sliding back now, we can talk about that, but there was this transformation. Quick overview. So part one is about that marriage, that relationship, the finding of, and I'm going to read something, the day my son was born in Oxford, Mississippi. But the larger frame is not just about that marriage when I talk about my family and I, but it's about a set of families, including musical families, including the men in the end of the book, the men in Parchman Penitentiary, who I taught blues literature to, and about finding in a very unexpected way a kind of family there. It's about somebody you never hear about in books about Mississippi, which is Master Ra, which is a still young Taekwondo. So that's the larger frame. So part two of the book is sort of kind of like coming into this idea of the love community. Well, it began at a period of time when I was first a club musician, sort of haunting the jazz clubs in Harlem, and then a street musician in Harlem. At a time when, if you know New York, the late 80s, you know Howard Beach, Bensonhurst, Crown Heights, those three markers of interracial kind of hatred. And I was interested in transracial community. So I found that for the first time in a serious way in a place that had initially scared me walking into Harlem. And then I became a Harlem street musician. I've written about that in another memoir called Mr. Satan's Apprentice, but I sort of revisit some of that here. And I'm interested in just interested in how that blessed me early in my adult life with a vision of what America could be at its best. The fiction's, of course, tested. It was tested back then. We were playing on the street in Harlem at a period of time when all this racial violence was happening, and it was commodified. The newspapers were pushing it out. How does it feel to be in that environment, trying to maintain a brotherhood of musicians, right? Well, I worked with Orleanian began off from 1986 until he died in 2020. In my current book, I've got my current musical aunt, so Rob the Blues Doctors, has his nephew in it. So my family, and it's about the way that there's that family connection. Part 3 is, imagine you have a mixed son, and when he's 2, Barack Obama's elected president. What does it feel like to have that relationship here at the local, but then on the national and global stage, you have the first sort of black biracial president? What does it feel like to have the winds at your back? If your kid goes, someday, son, pointing at the TV, said, man, we'd be you. I mean, what does that feel like? And then what does it feel like when America descends into what it descended into in the second Obama term? The violence, Gabby Giffords, but also Trayvon Martin and Michael Brown. And I write what I call sort of deep, fact-based, centrist re-litigations of the Trayvon Martin, George Zimmerman, Michael Brown things to try to understand, what do I need to learn from this? Can I learn from this in ways that will help me guide my son? That's part 3. Part 1, with that, in the end, it's called Reclamation. It's basically, I've already talked about several of those things, parts of it in Master Ra's Dojang. It's sort of trying to figure out where we are now. And one of the longest, and I'm wrapping up, one of the longest duration things, one of the people who disapproved of our marriage, our interracial marriage, was my wife's mother. You know, the long term, people say when families, just my mother was fine, but when families disapprove, often it's the kid, the children produced by the opinion, and sometimes the long term can change bonds. And my book ends with I think a really, hopefully moving, my editor said made him cry. He's a very hard-boiled guy. It was surprised when my mother-in-law welcomes me this time, your first time. So, yeah, it's a book that I think tries to give hope. This is sort of quick certain, but I unpack a lot of this.
We are sure, but now we're going to have reading. It's a lecture designer, but to the content. But here, I thought you would. Okay, don't put the DS good. Okay, when would it? We'll see if we have time. We don't board meeting. Okay, so one of the things that I noticed in both of your books, as just a place to sort of jump off with conversation, is the emphasis on local and on space, and the way that when it goes somewhere, it could shape your identity, and you could also shape the community around you. And so I was wondering if you would each talk a bit about that in your own context. I mean, for you, that's both Houston and a lot of places. I also love Mexico City, personally. But yeah, so could you talk a little bit about how going somewhere and getting to enact change on yourself was meaningful?
Actually, my name is Lawrence, but the reason why I said call me Larry was because I realized at 16, after experience with a psychiatrist, that I needed to build my own life. I had to create another life, and I wanted to have a name that fit that other life. This is when I first began to experience the gay community and the gay bar. This is in 1969. So it helped me, give me the privilege of doing that. I got tired of people making me what they wanted to be. So they say a Creole man's it's a Creole man's triumph over racism and homophobia. Every time I went somewhere, no matter where I traveled in the world, everybody would make me what they wanted to make me. For instance, when I was in Tel Aviv, I got off the boat and I told friends with me, they're gonna pull me on the side. They thought I was Palestinian. They treated me like dirt, which I understood. You give an 18-year-old a gun in that particular army, they're gonna think they got all the power in the world. I also understood that from being black in a white community. You don't talk to the cops the way you really feel. You tell them what they wanna hear. And so in Tel Aviv, it was where I began to realize and reaffirm the fact that call me Larry was the idea of shaping my own world around my thoughts and not somebody else's thought. Not the Catholic Church, not the rules of the Louisiana legislature, but the way I wanted to create it. Then it helped me when I moved to Houston, when everybody made me a Mexican. And so, and I would turn around and say, I'm not going to use the word, but I'd use the N-word. I'd say, no, I'm not black. This word. And they would sit there in shock, but I was just tired of it. So that's why the title in the book, and I've had friends criticize that. Why didn't you just say you were black? Read the darn book. You'll find out I'm very mixed. On my mom's side, it's Honduran and Guatemalan. On my dad's side, it's from France, Haiti and France. My grandmother was from France. They spoke French, so they fell in love. On the other side, they spoke Spanish. But nobody said that back in the 50s. You were either black or white in Louisiana. You had to pick a side.
Absolutely. So likewise, you talked a lot about, so in your case, you both had New York City and Harlem, and you also had the switch over to Mississippi. So I don't know which way you can feel free down trying to, well.
Yeah. So my book ends with the scene in which my mother-in-law welcomes me into the family house. And I think the last scene is sort of, I'm sitting in the living room, and there's like 15 people, and my son and my wife and her twin sister. I'm the one white guy, if you want to be that way. And it's a feeling of peace. It's a loving community. It's a hard-earned moment. But what's interesting then is that when I think about Harlem and I think about what it was for me growing up in the suburbs, about 15, 20 miles north of New York, of course, it was mediated. My relationship with Harlem early would have been 100% mediated. I'd never set foot there. Mediated by the news and by the images that were propagated. It was sweating black people, young boys over the water fountains, the hydrants, the water hydrants in the summer. People were sweating, they were angry. There was trouble down in the city. I did not project that, but it's just those were the images that came across. When I moved to New York in 1980, Harlem was the place that all grad students said, right on the edge, or perched on the edge of the heart of darkness. That was the great figure. It's like some white girl got killed coming through Morningside Park. It's like, don't go there. That's what I was told. Do not go to Harlem. Danger. Flashing red light. You can imagine then, given all that, what's it like to begin to go there. And then a very early time I went there, I was nervous. I went to Sylvia's with my girlfriend. But then girlfriend grad students, nobody said anything. It was totally friendly, but I was sort of panicked. I had no idea. So you talk about spaces. There are spaces that we are afraid to enter, no matter who we are. And it's unfamiliar and it drives them. But at some point, my book sort of narrates this. I met a guy on the street. I was playing downtown in a village, and a guy came up to me, and he was playing harmonica. I was here. And he said, "Man, that sounds good." He goes, "My name's Kevin Rollins. I'm Sonny's nephew." I said, "Sonny Rollins? Why? They've been copying Sonny Rollins." St. Thomas. So I drove him to, I think. And he said, "Hey, there's a place up in town. We should come up." And so it was 1980, 4 or 5. And it's called La Famille, the family. Interesting, La Famille. La Famille. He goes, "Hey, like you have a jam session coming in." And I went up. First day, I was ready to go. And I walk in the door. Nobody knows who he is. Now I'm dressed in jeans and a black jacket, and I realized many decades later that I probably looked like an undercover costume to people when I walked in the door. But I jammed in that club that night, and I narrate this, and it goes over really well. And I end up going back to the Harlem Times. So what I try to narrate then is sort of the process through which you enter a space that's theoretically not at all interested in having you there, and then through music, through that connection, begin to make your way. I think I can leave it at that. Just say that's one of the spaces. But maybe I should say, so what's Mississippi, man?
Louis saucepan takes years ago. I think she's sure to make it.
No, she's no, she can tell. Like you choose the Mississippi question.
Okay. I think you're going to go to Mississippi, so you have a time. And I was like, I'm getting literally since my time we heard about who's ready. But one of the things that you brought up that I think is really interesting in the context of Larry's story, and this discussion where he discusses repeatedly going into gay bars, gay spaces, and these being the places where you could find safe, where you were finally fully welcome, is fully able to sort of put yourself and embrace who you were. So I wanted to ask you, one of your concerns here, you're writing about this, like that it feels like they're using a lot of those spaces in the modern era because there's been sufficient assimilation that people don't see that as necessary. And so I just wondering if you could like sort of talk about your experience with community in like the gay bar scene and also what you didn't see. So your Bishop.
Well, I hate to step on the bridal shower crowd, but they find it very comfortable to bring their tribe into a gay bar. And they feel comfortable there. And I've talked to many of them because I didn't want to just stand there projecting anger. I want to try and understand why you're here. And it's sort of like they come here because they feel safe. And I understood that coming from women that have been going into bars and guys getting drunk and trying to pick them up, etc. They just wanted to have a good time. The other thing is we transitioned from bars owned by the mafia, because that's the only one that would serve us, to bars being owned by gay people. That can wipe out the discrimination. In the South, they still have black people called 3-4 picture IDs. And so the transition has been difficult, but I realized that in order for the gay bars that are left, that are standing, for them to survive, we've got to have revenue coming from other sources. And so I tend not to criticize the bridal showers or the others that come in. It angers me when you take the option of bringing your girlfriend into a gay bar and you're sticking your tongue down her throat with no regards for the environment you're in. I wouldn't be allowed to do that in your bar, so why do you come and disrespect mine? Now, I have gone up to one or two couples and say, this is not allowed, like I was about. So it helped me get the frustration out. We have decorum here. Just because it said the gay bar, that doesn't mean anything goes and this doesn't go. So it helps to translate my anger into something positive.
I'm going to do because I made really good transition from that. One other thing that you talked about in the context of bars is like sort of bathhouse culture, and in New York in particular, how bathhouses were almost their elbows food. And then there was sort of a circuit of them, or there's particular gay bars which are particular populations. And so, do you think that with that sort of breaking down of as many sort of exclusively gay spaces, do you think that there is more now mixing between all of the various flavors of gays?
No. I think that because of the internet and phones, et cetera, you don't see very many people going out. I thought it was cold. But as I go around the country restudying my community, the reality is that people feel more, the younger crowd feel much more comfortable meeting somebody on the phone. I've got to meet a person in person to get that feeling of who they are and then talk about their history. The younger gay community is more interested in using leagues like and swipe it and sort of doing stuff like that. So the blending is there, but it's one side. Mostly heterosexuals are coming into gay bar and feeding us financially, but in taking the spirit off. Now, mind you, the gay bars were funding the gay rights movement. So I don't know what the next step is, because we certainly got a big battle on my hand with this crowd that's in the United States. I'm trying to keep my comments peaceful and nice with that building over there.
They're going to say across the street, but we're done. Okay, so in that context, right? So now we're thinking about you're creating Shelly Davies and use right specific, which is something that features in to a lot of bar or public spaces or whatnot, but it's definitely sort of its own thing, And so you go down to Mississippi, now you have to build a community. I did. How did that go in the context? See, I told you we're right that how did that go in the context of sequence and create the community that you recently sort of discovered / had in our?
That's a great question. Nobody's thought to ask that. So let me think it through. First thing I did is I'm a guy who used to be a performing musician and then was a grad student and finally have a tenure track job at Xavier University, Research Point University. The first thing I do is, yes, I'm the blues guy at Ole Miss, but I'm not going to play. So the first thing I did was shut down the performance. But what I did, actually, the first thing I did was I did what I told them I would do. For 3 years in a row, I put on a blues conference. And so it wasn't about me performing, but somehow I'm bringing together as many possible voices, black, white, foreign and domestic, from all over, and about creating interesting conversations. It was a real success. We brought people over from Africa. A guy that I'd met when I was a busker in Paris, Abraham Yameyoga, who was in a wheelchair. He was from Burkina Faso. He spoke French. He was a French touring blues performer. I brought him over. I drove our financial guy like nuts because I spent $25,000. That's what I did. So I put my own music aside and I said, I'm going to create dialogues within a blues community very broadly conceived. And it really worked well. It worked well. And then I got tenure. Then I went to YouTube, and I talked about that a little bit here. I went to YouTube, and I said, well, now that I've got tenure, I can actually afford to let a cat out of the bag. It's for free. I can do it for free. And so if you were to go to YouTube and put in harmonica, you'd find hundreds of instructional videos that I put out there. So, and that got me a community from around the world of people who were really interested in learning how to play. I called it Blues Harmonica Sequence Revealed! In 2007, just trying to make something happen. And then in 2010, I made a solo album. And for the first time, I wasn't Mr. Satan's boy anymore, but I was a one-man band that I'd become. This is a story I don't tell here, but through my YouTube channel, a 16-year-old black kid from South Memphis, who's still fantastic friends. He's had an incredible career. He said basically, Mr. Gussow, you're doing that lick from Wherever Jam Were Wrong. So in the comments, so we became friends. And he said, hey, you come up to Memphis, and I'm in I think it's like a competition. And I coached him. I basically gave him the same lesson, stagecraft, on how to own the stage, that my own t-shirt, Black New Yorker, New Navigals, have given me. So one way to pull up the community is, in a musical context, is if you have gifts, you give. You pass it down, all right? And so you can say, well, blues is a black music, but blues is also a transracial brotherhood too. It's both those things. It's not just one or the other. And of course, blues is always more than one thing. So that's what I did. And then I made a one-man, after giving him that lesson, and him winning the competition, basically beating out all the stage kids, the stage brats. He'd had none of that, but he was an incredible harmonica player. He gave me a little stop box, and I heard that, and I played harmonica, and it reminded me of Mr. Satan, his rhythm, Mr. Satan, the guy with his names. And so I had to keep a one-man band and recorded an album, and then I put on something called Filter to Harmonica. So I'm going to be a promoter, basically, bring under the radar great players around the country and do sort of teaching and about concerts at night. And I did that. I find that 3 years is all I get for it. And everybody says, once get to the end of the third year, and they go, what's next year? And it's, can somebody else do it? So I dropped that. But that's how I reconstructed that as well. Though in those sort of short-term ways. But then I also found a guitar player, just a psychology professor at Ole Miss, who became the Blues Doctors, 2012. And now my son is part of that group. And there's one more element to this story, which is when this documentary called Satan and Adam came out in 2018. It actually was on Netflix from 2019 to 2021. I got an email from a guy who said, my name is Rod Patterson. I work at Sir Rod. I'm Mr. Satan's nephew. I love the documentary. Why don't we put together a little tribute act and do my own Muslims? And so we did that. So it's amazing when you put brotherhood and familial energies out in the world. We're all here, and that's what we're talking about, recreating the conference setting, if you will, of this community in the potential harmonica of blues community. Sometimes it can take unexpected hurdles. And meeting him was like meeting a long-lost brother. It's very eerie, isn't it? Sure. It was wonderful, and it continues. Like,
You guys are doing such a great job of giving me transitions to the other person. Thank you. because you were talking about sort of creating conferences and how you have to sort of put in the structure of building community and how hard it is to create something that's lasting, that's not solely dependent on doing it. And someone did a really good job of that in Houston when it comes to creating the Pride Parade and sort of sticking with it, as well as all of your work with the Gay Political Caucus. So I just started to talk about that.
Well, my idea was to expand the numbers. My first thought was I'm very political. So I thought, how do you get gay people to vote? This is back in 1979. How do you get gay people to become involved in a community they don't know anything about because they're afraid to come out, they're afraid to go in a gay bar? So I thought, because of my New Orleans upbringing, to put on a parade that put the community on display, where you could be able to pick out, oh, I want to join a sports association, or I want to join a church, or I want to join a political group, or whatever. You had an opportunity to do that. The other thing that angered me was that this movement had been run in the early days by predominantly white men with money, because that's the only one that could afford to come out. And I wanted to diversify that and offer it up to women, and particularly in Houston, where you have a large Hispanic community, I wanted them to see what was available to them. It worked. 10,000 people showed up, and it was the first time we'd ever done it. It'll be in its 50th year in 2 years, and we'll be celebrating the 50th anniversary. I hope I live long enough to see that. But I'm pleased with the results of what came as a concept of going up in New Orleans and using it as a tool
for political development, but to inspire young gay people to come out of the closet and be who they are and be themselves, and reinforcing that with organizations they could join and become a part of the community.
Yeah, one of the organizations that you talked about in the book was actually based on like sort of Mexican advocacy, but it seemed like the board was the most diverse of any of the boards. It's like you had a Creole guy, a black lady, an actually Mexican fella, and then like one other person. And so it just seemed really interesting that you were able to make room in something that was sort of an identity group for everybody.
Well, the idea of political strategy, because I knew this white, predominantly white, affluent crowd wasn't going to accept me as an individual. So what I did was I formed the Gay Chicano Caucus. Back then, Chicano meant inclusive word for all brown people, which I was made brown anyway. So I took that, I marched in with my people and demanded that we be heard. And because they were 50 paid members of the organization, I was able to get the president of the organization to work with me, and I became vice president of the organization. Once I had the power to do what I needed to do within the organization, I could spread the word and make it work. But it took coming in and being, clever in terms of presenting myself in one way and then bringing my group in and demanding the power. That's political power.
It's like just both of you have done a lot of work to build community around shared joy, it seems like. And like that could be the joy of music or the joy of being able to live fully in oneself out loud in public. And so one of the questions that I sort of warned you guys I was sort of going to ask, I rephrased it, was just how do you think your positioning, right, like who you are and what you bring to this scenario, which we've already sort of talked about, impact how you perceive the world and how you sort of took up this battle, right? How you decided that this is what I want to do, this is how I want to do it. How does who you are impact why you think you made those choices and what you included in the book? I'm going to go this way. Oh, you want to go?
Yeah, it makes me want to talk about something that's not in the book, but that would be a good example of this.
That's okay, too. People come for the exciting live
Yeah,
parts.
so 2 months ago, my wife and I, side by side in bed, asleep, 1:30 in the morning, got a call from a woman who was calling on our son's cell phone to say our son had been in a bike accident and we needed to come immediately to his dorm, an off-campus dorm. It's the worst call that any parent could get, right? And it stopped both our hearts, and we're, within 5 minutes, we're out the front door, and in the car and a half mile away, and we We drive up, and so my son is just, he's stubborn, he's bullheaded, right, and doesn't want to wear a helmet. Even when I tell him, Sean, something I write about here, Sean, I separated my shoulder when I had a bike wreck, and I had 2 weeks after moving to Mississippi. See the bump on my shoulder? See this? Wear a helmet. And he wouldn't, and so I'm thinking, what am I going to find? And our son there was the ambulance, there were 2 girls. Now, I haven't said they're 2 white girls, but they happened to be 2 white girls, and they were praying, they had prayed over him. There was a community of people there, the ambulance crew. Now, I could say that they were, white and black, young and old. They were. The choice is, with my ideals, if I were going to tell this story, how would I tell it? It's an example. He turned out to be okay, and at 4:30 in the morning, he walked out under his own power, and he's fine now. So he dodged the bullet. All he hit was his chin. Now, how's my positionality? My positionality in this case is, I'm a father. I'm not a white man. I'm not interracially married. I'm a father. And the father and the mother feel for their kid. They can't help but think, that's 3 months old, 19. And you're grateful for the angels who show up. The young kid who said, I'll help you get his bike, because his front wheel had fallen off. I'll help you get his bike back to his apartment. You're just in shock. And I think, so that's the opposite of the moment of joy, right? That's a moment of heart-sinking shock. And yet still, what struck me, and it's contemporary Mississippi, and it's not 1955, and it's not Emmett Till. It's this kid who's on the ground, and there are guys who finally put him in the ambulance and say, does he have a concussion? No. So my positionality is, what I'm interested in is the moments where who I am is just that beating heart, and just that concern.
Yeah, for sure. I want to make sure that we have time for questions, so I also want Larry to answer first. You're good. You're like, I'll take the questions. Let's go. All right. You know what? Fair enough. Let's go for questions. We've only got 5 minutes. Do we have any? Or I get to force Larry to answer mine. So any questions in the audience for anyone? Are we just shy?
Nobody wants to be
Are we
first.
hungry? Please do.
Hello, this is a question for Larry, although Adam, you're welcome to answer as well. Larry, one of the words you've used a lot in your responses today has been anger, and I am so proud of you for retaining that anger and putting it to such productive use for the good of so many. When I was working with you, I will say that you are the author that I've worked with who has the best sense of humor, and you made me laugh all the time. And so I just wonder if you can talk about how that full range of emotions, how you channel your humor and your anger together.
Great question. Because at 16, after leaving the psychiatrist's office, in a simple mind of a child, I saw some pickets in front of Maison Planche's department store, and I thought, let's take care of this black thing. And then this is 1964. There'll be a movement for my community later on, not even thinking there would be a gay rights movement. And what amused me was I'm on a picket line. I asked this guy, can I carry your sign? You want to take a break? He said, sure. I'm walking toward the river, and this white woman spit on me and called me poor white trash. And then I started walking the other direction, and a black woman said, you ought to be home helping your mama. You shouldn't be out here causing trouble for all of us. I found it amusing. I still do today when people call me names, whether it's in Israel, New York City, or whatever, making me what they want to make. So I've channeled that anger into a celebration of diversity, of celebrating what my family is and what it means to live in a city like New Orleans, where everything is diverse. The food, the celebration, the different celebrations that we do with music, with food, everything we do is diverse. And so I've translated that anger that I feel and still feel today when I worked in that Capitol building on that bill that said you could kill a person that you thought was HIV positive. And I was so angry that when it was over with, the guy that I was working with me grabbed me by the coattail. And the legislator that presented the bill, I asked him, what about the black community? And he said to me, to my face, if they can't afford a 5-cent condom, you know the word, F them. And I thought, this is a state legislator telling me this. So the day we kill the bill, his bill, by one vote, the guy working with me was pulling me by the coat. I went up to him and I said, I'm one of those N-words you mentioned. That's why I worked so hard to kill your bill. So I always come back to it in a positive sense in terms of channeling that anger to do some good for the community as a whole. Got 1 minute.
We got 1 minute, so is it a quick question? Or do you just want to applaud the lovely people who have given their time, their work, their energy into making these books? I would just like to say thank you both so much for your thoughts and your information, all the stories you've given us today, both in book and out of book. Ooh. And we got bonus musical selections as well. So thank you guys so much for being here. Thanks for celebrating books. Thank both of these men. Have them sign your stuff right now like I'm going to, or you can find them at a book signing within about 15 minutes of now. Okay?